This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the ICG committee member responsible for running our webinar programme. So for today's webinar, we're delighted to welcome Nic Bulois, should be able to pronounce that, ICG member and co-founder of Insight Angels. Nic is an industry leader in quantitative research, a skilled workshop facilitator, lucid brand strategist, and thrives on bringing together multiple insight strands to help clients see the bigger picture and empower them to act. Prior to founding Insight Angels, Nic led the insight practice at brand and insight consultancy Added Value. He also spent several years client-side leading strategy and insight for eBay in France, Italy, and Spain. In this roundtable online discussion, Nic will be covering topics such as when and how to do segmentation studies and the range of models out there which could help. As usual, there'll be a Q&A session at the end of Nicolas' talk, so do switch on your webcams at the end and raise your hands if you have a question, or if you prefer to remain anonymous, then please type your questions in the chat box and I'll read them out for you. So this webinar is generously sponsored by Rigor Research Limited, your data collection and advanced analysis partners. Before I hand over to Nic, here are some more webinars and events we have planned for you. So please make a note of these dates in your diaries. And don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars. Sponsorship normally costs £120 for a lot of exposure on our website, mailers and social media, and of course on the day. Please contact Lucy if you'd like to know more. So our speaker today is Nic Bulois of Insight Angels, and I'll now hand over to Nicolas.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally. I will share my deck and hopefully that's going to work. Can everybody see the deck?
Looks good. Absolutely looks good.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Basically, what I want to cover today is kind of our approach to segmentation. It's not necessarily the truth or the only way to do segmentation, but it's kind of our experience and how we approach segmentation, and giving an update on some of the big topics that I've covered or that have come up recently around segmentation. So a lot of you might have heard about demand moments. This is all the rage at the moment. A lot of the big players out there will talk about demand moments, so I'll give you our perspective on it. I actually built the demand moment approach for Added Value back in the days. I think that things have evolved, but I'll give you kind of our perspective on this. And also another topic that I will mention in the session is around big data, because there's a lot of discussion in the world of segmentation on the role of big data and how do we link segmentation to big data, or is actually indeed segmentation still useful in a world where our clients have got access to other sources of data. So I'll give you my perspective. It's as I said, it's not meant to be the truth or gospel truth. It's any comments, any builds, any other perspective that you may have and want to share with the group, please do so. Very quickly on Insight Angels, we're a small agency founded in 2015 by myself and Barbara Langer, who we basically combine a lot of experience, over 25 years experience each in the world of insight, both agency and client side. Some of you might have met Barbara when she was client side at eBay. She spent 10 years leading the insight function of eBay before founding Insight Angels. Should say as well as this is a family business, because as well as my business partner Barbara is also my wife. So it's a family business. And the way we work and the way what we try and do when we do our work is bring this combination of client side and agency side experience that we've got to help our clients be very, very crisp on the decision makings that they make, basically, and kind of bringing to life the insights that we build, or that we build for our clients is really important. And why are we talking about segmentation this morning? Even though it might not have been the vision when we created Insight Angels, we found ourselves being very much a segmentation business. It might not be what we set out to do in the first place, but a lot of our clients came to us with briefs that lend themselves to segmentation. And we ended up building a reputation for ourselves for being segmentation expert. And a lot of our clients will be in the tech industry because we are both ex-eBay, and a lot of our eBay colleagues have moved on and became very senior people in other businesses and came to us with briefs that really clearly were segmentation briefs. So that's how we ended up doing this. So we've done over the last 7-8 years an awful lot of segmentation in all sorts of categories, from food and drinks. We've just delivered a huge piece of segmentation for alcoholic wines on alcohol consumption in the UK, or we've done multiple segmentations for Jordans and Ryvita in the UK and across Europe. We're doing a lot of work in fashion. We're doing a lot of work in travel and hospitality. We've done a couple of big pieces of segmentation for Eurostar and for Trendline across Europe, and a lot of work also in e-commerce and marketplaces. So we've got a lot of experience of segmentation across a wide variety of categories and multiple countries. So that's going to make us expert in segmentation, not necessarily the authority, but certainly a lot of experiences and point of views on what makes great segmentation. So what have we learned over the years? Well, the first thing is segmentation is cool. And it sounds maybe a little bit trite or obvious to say this, but I think at the end of the day, many businesses need a core of what they do. And the reason why that is that every business that we work with need to make choices. They can't be everything to everyone. They don't have infinitely deep pockets, so they need to make strategic choices about who they're going to talk to, what their business is going to talk about, and that's where the segmentations come in. It's a way to make what is a very complex environment in which they operate, with a lot of different consumers, with a lot of different competition, a lot of different propositions that they're fighting against. And it's quite a complex environment, and it basically makes that world simpler to grasp. And that's where a segmentation comes in. The other point is that a lot of our briefs come from marketing, but segmentation is not only a marketing tool. It should sit at the center of everything that the business does. And I think that's a really, really important point, is that it should be a unifying force across the business. So we work a lot with tech companies, and quite often, the briefs come in from the marketing team, and the first thing we ask our client is, can you bring in the product team in? Because if we don't have product on board, this project is going to fail. And building the right product, the right experience to respond to the needs of the segments that we've identified is absolutely crucial. So it's way beyond just marketing. And I think, at the end of the day, and I would say that because a lot of our business is segmentation, but I think it's probably, from a research point of view, one of the most important investments that a business can do. And it is at the end of the day about answering two fundamental questions for their business: where do they play, and how do they win? And it's a way to avoid making costly mistakes. And just to give you an example, I don't know if you guys have heard of a brand called CarWow, but we've done a big piece of segmentation a few years ago on CarWow, which is basically a website at which you can buy your car. It's a very different proposition. Basically, you say, I want Skoda Octavia, and basically car dealers around the country will fight for your business rather than you having to go to car dealers. Is a car dealers going to you and saying, here's our best offer on the car that you're looking for. And they had a big question. They came to us saying, we believe that we need to, we've kind of maxed out our growth opportunity among the people we've reached to so far, and we want to expand our proposition and change our proposition to make it a broader proposition. And actually, the segmentation showed that they were far from having maxed out on the type of consumers that they'd already, or car buyers that they'd already reached to, and there was a massive opportunity to grow. So instead of changing the product and messing around on the experience that they were offering, we said, actually, you need to double down on the core segments that you've already reached, and actually, continue to expand on this. So it was a very important piece of data that they needed to make the right decision for them, basically. And then we had a big debate on what the right decision was. So basically, fundamentally, segmentation is more than just research. It's basically a strategic tool to drive growth for your business. It needs to help our clients answer, how do you drive penetration? How do you bring new people in? How do you create new usage occasion? How do you drive frequency? Or how do you switch consumers to more premium offers? How do you drive value? So where do you focus, and how do you execute? Very big piece of research, and it's more than just research. It's really about helping our clients make those fundamental decisions. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing is, I hate more than anything a brief that says we need a segmentation. What I want is a brief that says, here's a business question, here's a business problem that we have. It might be that segmentation is the right answer, but then we need to build the right type of segmentation for the client's question. So is it about an overall strategic direction that they need? Is it about building their brand proposition? Is it about innovation? Is it an issue of portfolio management? They've got too many brands in their portfolio and they need to rationalize their portfolio. We've done a big piece of segmentation with Arla, the company behind brands like Lurpak and Crevendale and all the dairy products. And they had a big issue in Denmark, where there are so many brands in the same category that were competing against each other. So they need to make some big decisions around their portfolio. So we built a segmentation specifically for that. Is it about category management? Is it about better CRM? Really understanding what the fundamental issue is, then we can build the right segmentation. And it's also about understanding their business reality. So how much do they really already know? Do they have a segmentation already in place? And how good is that segmentation? Do we need to take that into consideration? How does their business operate? Who are the key stakeholders? Very importantly, and I'll touch on that in a minute, do they have an internal or transactional database? A lot of you will be working with tech companies who have a huge wealth of data about their own customers. And how do you plug into that with your segmentation is a big question. So, taking in consideration the business question, taking in consideration the business reality that they're operating in. Having said that, while there's multiple ways of segmenting your market, there's some kind of big principle behind a good segmentation. One of the key things, and that's, eight segmentations are we're going to do a typology. Why are you doing typologies? Does that predict what consumers actually do? And at the end of the day, a good segmentation is one that predicts the behavior that our clients need to drive. So in the case of Carwow, the behavior is, are people buying their cars today? Are they doing it online? Are they doing it offline? If online, what type of proposition are they using? So what behavior are you trying to predict? In the case of Accolade Wines, on alcohol is what drink do people choose on a specific occasion? And how do you make wine more of a choice for them versus other categories that they might drink on that occasion? So it's about understanding what influences the decision, and basically a good segmentation is multidimensional. It takes all the different dimensions of what drives consumer choices into consideration, and it needs to be predictive of that consumer choice. If your segmentation is just a piece of segments that don't predict behavior, those segments are pretty useless. So that you really need to be anchored in the decisions that you are trying to predict. As I said, it's more than just marketing. You need to engage all stakeholders from the get-go and make sure that you don't have a blind spot. Very often with our tech clients, the product team is the most difficult one to get to, but we need to make sure that we've got the product team on site. Otherwise, they will not. They could derail the system and the outcome of the research. A good segmentation is anchored in commercial reality. It's not just good enough to have percentages of the sample. We always, wherever possible, build in volume, value, and even profit. We've had some clients who've given us, we've opened up their financial books and say we make that much profit on these brands. So we overlaid profit on our segments, so we could tell them which segments were the most profitable to them specifically. And then last but not least, it needs to inspire. A good segmentation, yes, it's a lot of science, but it needs to be also a little bit creative, so people want to be part of this. And we've done some really quite interesting things. So with Accolade Wines, recently we identified out of the 9 typologies that we had, 3 that were really critical for their brands. And we actually invited a panel of people representing those 3 typologies as part of the workshop. And we did a Zoom webinar with these people where our clients could actually interact and ask questions with people who were representative of their core segments. And that was incredibly powerful, because suddenly it was more than just a piece of research. And the last piece, which sounds obvious, but is really important, is you need to define your category in the right way. So in the case of Accolade Wine, the original brief, the work we've just done was actually a refresh of a previous segmentation. But the original brief was, we want to understand the world of wine, and we pushed back saying, actually, you want to understand the world of alcohol, because if you fail to broaden your perspective, you'll only understand what drives people's choice of wine. But based on your brief, you really need to understand the bigger picture about what drives the choice of wine versus the choice of beer. So we really recommended them to broaden to all alcohol. Similarly, with Jordan's, our cereal clients, is it about cereal? Is it about cereal and porridge? Is it about all of breakfast? These are big questions that, and the answer will come from the business questions that they need to answer. But you really need to have a discussion about what is the category and how do you, what is the business question that you've got to really make sure that you've got the right category, because if you don't do that, your segmentation might fall apart, basically. So, topics that I wanted to broach. So the first one is demand moments. And a lot of you might have heard about demand moments. It's also range recently. It's been some things that as everybody started talking about. One of the first agencies talking about it back in 2010, 2011. And then a lot of companies have jumped to the bandwagon. But it's actually quite simple what demand moments are. As I said, your segmentation needs to be predictive of consumer choices. And basically, demand moments are a way to segment your market in as much granularity as you can, taking into consideration all of the different windows that drive people choices. So we measure the 5 Ws, the why, the when, the who, the what, the where, and basically a demand moment is a segment that combines more than one dimension if that's relevant for your market. So typically, historically, segmentations, you had a who model and a why model. So you had typologies, who your consumers are, and then need states. And basically, demand moments is just one step further than that, building in and combining other elements to understand the choices that people make. So it's a slightly more complex way to segment, but just to give you a concrete example, so with our clients at Accolade, we had some segments. If we stop at need states, for instance, we had like a chill out moment. I'm drinking alcohol to chill out. But what we found is that actually the where people are on the occasion drives quite different behavior. So if you're chilling out at home in the evening and you're having a glass of wine or a beer, your choices are quite different to if you're chilling out at the pub. So the where people are is actually quite important to take into consideration. So we look at the segmentation, and it's a mix of why, the need states, and where, because that really drove, is it on train or off train? Basically, is it at home or at the pub or at the restaurants? Because that really drove different behaviors. We've done a big piece of work in France for a company called Donor, and they are companies that does sandwiches and salads. And here what we found is that, yes, you do have need states. I want something quick and easy, for instance, but actually I want something quick and easy at lunchtime. Your behavior is very, very different to I want something quick and easy in the evening. And the choices that you're going to make and the products and the brand you're going to choose, whether it's lunch or evening, is very different. So in that case, our demand moment was needs, but also the when, to bring the extra granularity of understanding the moment. And it's all about getting as close as possible to the decision that people make, basically. So it's just one step further from just doing these states and typologies, which is what historically has been done, and is bringing in the other dimension. And it comes from analysis. It comes from doing a driver analysis to start with, understanding the role of the different Ws, is the choices that people make. and then making a decision on which ingredient do you bring in your segmentation, and start combining them to be as close as possible to the moment of consumption and therefore to the moment of choice that people make, basically. Yeah, it's about a consumption space, a consumption moment. So the most popular category, people who experience these moments are, but it's not about people, it's about the occasion. I don't know if there's any question on demand moments, or if we should move on to the next.
Nothing's come through so far, Nic, so I should move on.
I shall move on. So the other topic that comes on a lot in our discussions with our clients is the role of shopper. And a lot of our segmentation are consumption or consumer segmentation. So the moment of consumption, not necessarily the moment of shopping, but obviously the consumer is a shopper very often. That's something that we have to remember. And a lot, especially with our FMCG clients or with accolade wine, or indeed with Jordan and Ryvita, the key thing is linking. The segmentation would not have been very powerful if we had not been able to link the consumption to the shopping journey, basically. So where did they buy the product, and how does our shopping experience work, basically, because that's a really important part to for our clients. So yes, segmentation questionnaire are very long, and space is at a premium on a questionnaire, but trying to build in at least some high-level shopper questions in your questionnaire is going to, especially for your FMCG clients, it's going to be very, very important. And being able to build a tool, so with accolade wine, being able to say actually, or to get our data by people who buy their wine at Tesco's or Sainsbury's, and understanding the different behaviors and what drive a Sainsbury's shopper or a Tesco shopper is absolutely critical. So you need to have that discussion, but you need to make space for some element of shoppers. There's always that much you can put to the questionnaire, but have a few questions on shopper is really important. And the other part is linking your data to panel data or the transactional database is something that is becoming easier. So you building segments where you can then overlay the segments in a panel, in a consumer panel, is incredibly powerful. So you need to be aware that this is something you might want to do up front, and know which consumer panels the consumers would like to build your segments in, so you build the right approach to do that, basically. But finding ways to link the consumption and the shopper and the shopping moments is really important. That leads to one big topic that is very hot in the world of segmentation today, which is the role of big data. So back in 2013, 2014, there was a lot of articles in the research world. Segmentation is because data is here, and big data is all you need to understand your consumer. And simply, you've got a massive digital trail that we live as consumers, and that digital trail is more and more accessible, easily accessible by our clients. So basically, you ended up with a lot of companies doing transactional-based segmentation, or even social media segmentation, just using the trail that you're living on social media and saying that's enough to understand your consumer. I think the debate has moved on quite a bit over the last few years. I think big data, and my point of view is that big data is a key resource that we can leverage when it's available, but it's not enough. and actually big data is not that big at the end of the day because it's very imperfect. And you know, claiming that big data is the answer, my point of view is that it's probably a lie. And anybody would say we've cracked big data, I'd be quite nervous about it and quite dubious. But having said that, it's something that we need to take into consideration when we do our segmentation. And basically, you know, some of our segmentation are purely survey-based, and that's, you know, if the brief is about positioning, about brand development, about innovation, no amount of big data will help you on that, and because you need quite granular emotional dimensions that big data doesn't necessarily have. So a lot of our segmentation will be purely survey-based and not necessarily great for CRM or activation or for tracking results over time because it's a one point in time piece of research, but they do serve a big purpose. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got purely database or transactional based data, which a lot of our tech clients do. And they're great for activation, for CRM, they're great for longitudinal understanding, so understanding the where segments evolve over time. We've done a big piece of research with Freddie Flowers. I don't know if you've come across them, but they identified segments in their database, and some segments were very long-term clients and some were not, and they could see the tracking and understanding their behavior over time on their website. But the problem with purely database-driven segmentation is that you're limited to the data you've got on your database, and you don't have all the soft, kind of, even not that soft. Sometimes you don't even know what age they are or what gender they are. But even you're certainly missing all the emotional dimensions behind why they're doing what they're doing on your website. And you're certainly missing what else they do. So, at eBay, at one point we tried to do a purely database segmentation, and we were simply missing the fact that some very important segments to us were also very, very important to Amazon. They were eBay shoppers, they were also massive Amazon shoppers. And that was a big piece of information that we simply didn't have on our database. So, it's the differences between the two. So basically, wherever possible, we need to combine both, the client database and the external database, if that's possible. And certainly linking also to media surveys, to geodemographics data, to other sources of information to try and complement your knowledge is really important. So trying to bring as much dimensions to your data as you can. So there's different ways of doing it. Obviously, upfront planning is really important, knowing what other sources of data you're likely to want to link your database in. A lot of our clients want to link to TGI, for instance, which is great. TGI is a fantastic tool. The media survey has got an incredible wealth of information about the consumer. Knowing that that's something you want to do up front is really important, so you can build the right hooks and bridges to TGI. You also need to know and decide which of the two sources of data, the internal and the survey, needs to take the lead. So you can do a transactional-led segmentation and then use a survey to illustrate your segments, or vice versa. Doing a dual approach is really important. With all our tech clients, we talk to a panel sample of people in their category, and then we also do the same survey among their own customers, and we can look at the two sources. And then you need to really have a discussion with your clients if they want to tag the database with the segments to make sure that you can do that in a very effective way. So for instance, with our Trendline client, tagging the database. The typologies is virtually impossible because they don't know much about their own clients, but what they know is the type of trips that they do, so the travel mission, the travel journey, or the journeys that they have. So making sure that in our survey, we've got questions around the journey that they do that they also have in their database was really important. So we could recreate what we call travel missions onto their database. So that's about big data and linking your segmentation to big data. The last couple of topics, I think they're very, very obvious, but they're big topics that often obviously the bringing to life and social more than just research. It is to inspire people. So finding the right tools to create that emotional engagement is really important. There's all sorts of different ways you can do it. Some of the things that we've done recently, like creating a Zoom meeting or a Zoom webinar with a representative panel of their core typologies, and having the client to interact for 30 minutes with real consumers and being able to ask them questions is really powerful. And it's suddenly we didn't learn anything that we didn't have in PowerPoint, but it was nothing new, but it was real word, it was real emotion, and that was incredibly powerful. So things like this, that is really important. Obviously COVID-19, we live in a post-pandemic world. I think a lot of our clients come to us and say, our segmentation was, 2019, 2020, last time we did a segmentation, what's our perspective on this? Reality is, in most categories, the world has changed. So you probably need to start thinking about refreshing your segmentation. A segmentation that, typical shelf life as a segmentation is 4 to 5 years. I think with the pandemic, it will have shortened a bit, and probably a good idea to refresh. So use your pre-pandemic segmentation to hypothesize about what has changed, but refresh and look at the new behaviors. And if you think about it in terms of, for Trainline, for instance, our segmentation pre-pandemic has, it's not real anymore because the way people travel and the reason why people travel has changed. Similarly, with Accolade, we have done a segmentation in 2018. The way people consume alcohol now has completely changed. So, we waited as much as we could to make sure that we were representative of, we were in a normal time as much as possible. It's really important to make sure that you refresh your segmentation. And then the last part is a lot of our clients come to us and say, I want to do a segment across multiple markets. And most of our segmentation we do are multiple markets. And they're like, you can't do that because people are so different across the world. Actually, you can do that, and you can segment across markets. There's different ways of doing it. A top-down where you do a global model, a bottom-up where you do individual model per country, or an in-between approach where you run both top-down and bottom-up and compare and combine wherever relevant. And the right approach will depend on your clients and their markets. The reality is a lot of our multi-country are European countries, and as much as we'd like to believe that each country is different, actually there's more that unites us in Europe than separates us. And there's a lot of very, very common behaviors and common beliefs across Europe. So doing a top-down approach across Europe is definitely something we can do. So in short, segmentation is cool. It's a critical investment for most businesses. It's not just a marketing tool. It should be a unifying tool across the organization. There are proven principles for success, but one size doesn't fit all. You really need to understand the client's questions to have the right approach to segmentation. Demand moments. it's just a more granular way of segmenting your market. Is bringing in new other elements, contextual elements, to really be as close to the moment of consumption as you can, to recreate the decision that people do. So the why, the when, the where, the who, and combining this into a single model. Big data has not made segmentation relevant, but it's changed the way segmentation needs to be designed and making sure that you're linking to big data. Is it the right time to do a big segmentation? I think so. I think clients should plan for one to make sure that they are looking at the post-pandemic world and understanding their new reality. And operating globally is now a barrier to segmentation. So these are the big topics that I wanted to share with you on our perspective on segmentation. If we open the floor to questions, I guess.
Thank you, Nicola. That was really interesting, a very thorough overview of what's happening in segmentation at the moment. We have got a few questions in the chat box. I think Natalie unfortunately had to leave us, but she's left a couple of questions for you to think about, to talk about maybe. So she says, thank you for this very interesting presentation. Unfortunately, she had to go, but her questions are, is segmentation accessible to smaller businesses? From past experience, budgets involved were quite high. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, and does it make sense for early stage startups that are still defining their targets? So first of all, is segmentation accessible to smaller businesses?
Most of our clients will be smaller businesses. So we are working with a number of small-ish brands. So things like Freddy's Flowers, Car Wow. We've done work with Urban Messages. These are not big, brands and big businesses out there. And I think yes, segmentations are expensive, but it's about knowing what you're trying to do and being very focused on the segmentation. We can do a really good segmentation for as little as £30,000 if we're very focused. And yes, it still sounds like a lot of money, but it's about being very focused on what you're trying to do. There's big companies out there. There's Added Value or Kantar now, or the Ipsos have you believe that it's hundreds and thousands. It doesn't have to be, and we can do some really powerful work for not that big budgets. And I think the second question is related to this about startups. It's an interesting question. A lot of our businesses have moved, or a lot of our clients have moved on from being just a startup. And I think when you're a startup, I think your strategy is any customers will do. And a lot of our clients come to us with their briefs when they're coming to that point where growth is slowing, and that strategy of any customers will do is not good enough anymore. And it's about which customers do we really need to bring to get to the next phase of growth. So I would argue that it's probably, I'd love for startup to do segmentation, but I think it's probably too early for them because they are still defining their businesses, and it's kind of like who they become is that kind of trial and error that a lot of new businesses have. So it's kind of that next phase in their growth where segmentation really needs to come in, where they need to be a lot more rigorous in terms of understanding their consumers and starting making big decisions about where they're going to invest. And that's kind of where we find most of our clients fall in, and they just need to get that rigor to get to the next phase of growth. And so it doesn't have to be big brands, but it's kind of those brands that have already got a good amount of history behind that, basically.
Okay, great. We've got a question now from Dan. I don't know if, Dan, you want to put on your webcam and ask the question directly of Nic, or shall I read it out for you? Shall I read it?
Hello. Yes.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yes. I was just trying to sort out my technology. Hello, Nic. Thank you for the presentation. Really interesting. My question was about attitudinal segmentations, and where I've seen them used in the past, I've always found them incredibly interesting, but ultimately limiting in the sense that they can't do what you described here, as in be mapped to other sources of data. What's your view on attitudinal segmentations and their role?
So it's really interesting, and thanks for asking, because it's a pushback we often get on attitudinal segmentation. And so a couple of things. The first one is most of our segmentation will have an element of attitudinal segmentation. So the typology model will be quite often purely attitudinal, but it's more than just attitudes to life, it's attitudes to the category. So it needs to be very close to the category that the clients operate in. So for instance, on alcoholic wine, we've got who they are as people, but also who they are as alcohol drinkers, their attitudes to alcohol and their attitudes to wine. And in the case of car wow, it was who they are as people, but also their relationship with their cars and how important cars are for them. So being very granular on the category, in terms of because that predicts what people do basically and how people behave. The issue with attitudinal segmentation is, you're absolutely right, is that they're fantastic because they give you who your target is as people. They're not that great because they are very difficult to link to other sources of information. And I think so there's different ways of dealing with it. The first one is, I mentioned it already, but you've got a tool like TGI, which is incredibly powerful. I don't know if you've come across the TGI database, but it's a media survey that's run, I think there's 5 countries in Europe, and they've got something like 300 or 400 different attitudinal statements, but they also have all the media information, all their consumption of categories of brands, etc. It's an incredible database. And making sure that you build bridges with the TGI, and by that I mean making sure that you've got a good selection of attitudinal segments in your segmentation that links to TGI, that are the same as TGI, is really important, because then you can recreate your segments into the TGI database. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, the issue with doing this is that you need to have a class that ties into TGI and has access to TGI. So not all classes have that. Other thing that we've done, which is really interesting, is especially with our tech clients, but not only our tech clients, we've just done a big piece of segmentation with guide dogs that are on IB on people who are blind and partially sighted. And what we've done with them, with these clients, and we do that a lot with our tech clients, is that we create golden questions, which is then asked to their new customers at the time of registration. So if you register as a potential customer to Guide Dogs, you will be asked the golden questions now. So moving forward, they're starting to be able to see what type of person you are and what's your relationship with sight loss. And that's a very powerful tool. So I think basically the point is attitudinal segmentations are really, really important, but you need to find ways to build links to real people so they become powerful, on an ongoing basis. And there's ways to do that with building them into, bringing link to TGI database or similar, or to have golden questions that you then ask to your own customers to be able to tag your own customer base with those segments, basically. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Looks like you did. There's another question that that Liz has posted on the chat box. Liz, I don't know if you want to put your webcam on and ask the question of Nic, or should I read it out for you? Up to you. Looks like she's coming forward. Hi, Liz.
Hi there. So thank you so much, Nic. This has been really, really interesting today. I come very much from a B2B context, and often really quite heavy B2B, both in tech and other spaces, particularly around professional services and IT services. I can see demand moments as being tremendously powerful in the pure consumer environment, and answering, getting clients out of those boxes they get themselves into sometimes. But I mean, to add in a bit of Jeff's follow-up here, also, which is, can you talk a little bit about some of the sort of heavier B2B work that you've done, and how, for example, you might incorporate a demand moment model into, say, an enterprise buying a software solution, say for CRM or something like that, or maybe a truck fleet, or maybe implementing a data center?
So we don't do a lot of B2B work, but we have done some B2B work. And I'll give you an example of, it was actually a qualitative segmentation, not a quantitative segmentation, but we did build a demand moment model with one of our clients, which does, they do hydraulic tables that goes in factories. So, you know, those tables where the worker is always working at human height rather than having to bend down. And our client was actually ex-Arla, came from a consumer background, and I love the work you've done on Demand Moment. I'm now working with this company. I need Demand Moment in this business. And we're like, ooh, how do we do this? And actually, what it came down to, and it's about the philosophy of Demand Moment. In all of the work we did, so we did about 100 interviews, so qualitative, but pretty heavy qualitative, with people from different industries, people, we were using hydraulic tables in different contexts. And then the way we looked at it as data was understanding what really drove the decisions that they were making in terms of what type of tooling what they were bringing in their factories and why they were using this type of products, the hydraulic table and the hydraulic technology, and what was the role of it in their world. And it's really about understanding those key decisions that we had. And then we built a segmentation model, and actually it was very much driven about where in the production line does a tool come in. So is it in the manufacturing? Is it at the packaging stage? Is it as a loading onto truck stage that comes? So it's kind of breaking down the production into these stages, because we found that it really drove the type of decisions they were making. And then something very obvious was the industry they're in, because the requirements that you have, if you've got a table in an hospital, a hydraulic table in an hospital environment, is very different to if it's in a car environment or in the food environment. So, in food and drink, or even in hospital, having tables that you can disinfect and keep clean all the time is incredibly important. Not so important in heavy manufacturing. So it's the way we built the Demand Moment was really, just like we do in consumer world, is breaking down the decisions and what influences that decision, and understanding the different elements that drive the decision.
Thank you.
Okay, just quickly, because we're running short of time now, just a quick question from Jeff. What's your view on qualitative personas? Do you have an opinion on use of personas in qualitative research as a form of segmentation?
So it's really interesting. The reason why I was hesitating is a lot of our clients, as I said, come from the tech world and come to us with we've built personas. And then you look at the way they've built personas, it's absolutely not anchored in data or in consumer understanding. It's based on kind of looking at their own customers and making some assumptions, and some people in a workshop, in a meeting room, building some personas, but it's not anchored in real data. So I don't like those personas, but personas that are anchored in data, either qualitative or quantitative, but in really understanding your consumers and that are built on what pulls people apart and true insight. I think they're great, and a lot of the work we do. So obviously we do a lot of quantitative segmentation. What we then follow on is qualitative work to bring the segments to life. And quite often at the end of this process is we've got personas saying, now here is Andrea, who is representative of this type of segments for you, and here is who she is as a person. But it comes from real data to start with. So even though we end up with a persona, it's anchored in data. So I think personas that are anchored in real data are great. Personas that are just built on fluffy assumptions are not that great. And I think that they're quite dangerous because clients think that they're a segment, but they're not, basically.
Okay, I think we're pretty much out of time, but a very quick question from Karen. Hi, Nic. Demand moment, also complex in financial services. There's a big difference between choosing providers and then different demand moments when a customer. How do you do a segmentation that works across both? I don't know if that's clear enough. Maybe if Karen's still here. Karen, do you want to?
Yes, sorry, I sent it too quickly. Just very briefly, we find financial service segmentations more complex, specifically with demand, working out the demand, because when you're choosing providers, particularly with long decision-making processes, it's there's one set of types of client, but then when they become clients of a provider, they have different needs and attitudes, etc. So it's food for thought, really. We have struggled with those two different sort of modes of choosing and being a customer.
So what's behind the question? Is it about how do you define the elements that makes people choose the financial services that they choose, or I'm not entirely sure I understand the question.
Okay, so it's probably too complex and it's now the end of the time, but I'm delighted to chat offline with you. I think it's been fascinating, thank you. It's just about us making sure the solution we provided to a financial services client makes them understand the segmentation has to work across the choosing environment and then being a client, or so when I said being client, being a customer of the financial services provider. And there is quite different mindsets and dynamics when you become a customer of a long-term financial services company. So it's complex. We've done it and it sort of works, but there are challenges with those two mindsets because they're quite different.
Yeah, you've got my email address here on the screen. So if you want to reach out and we can discuss that. We've done quite a lot of financial services work, so we can compare notes on how to do that.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
That sounds great. I think we're going to have to wrap it up hear Nicola and everybody else. So just Nicola, thank you so much. I think the number of questions that have been sent through clearly show that people are interested in this, and it's a very interesting topic, and you've given a very good overview of the different methods out there and things that people should take into consideration when they're designing a segmentation study. So thank you very much for your time today, and thank you to everybody for tuning in, logging in today and joining us for this webinar. Do come back and attend one of our webinars in the future. We've got a great program coming up, and it just remains to say have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye.
Excellent. Thank you very much.